All right, this first lesson is on solving equations. Some of what we go through is going to be a review from Math 7. Some, like the distributive property, should be a review from 6th grade math. But then what's new and what you missed from IM is applying all of those smaller steps into a multi-step equation. So they'll be practiced throughout. Please complete the notes and please complete all the assignments at the end of the video. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to state the goals of solving an equation and also solve a multi-step equation involving distributive property, combining like terms, and variables on both sides. So as we go through this, be thinking about what are inverse operations, how do I apply the distributive property, what does it mean to combine like terms, and some of the vocabulary that you'll see will be equation, variable, isolating the variable, inverse operations, distributive property, and combining like terms. All right, so this is a recap from Math 7. So this is solving a two-step equation. So for example, if we want to solve for x in the equation 4x minus 3 is equal to negative 11, the very first thing I always recommend doing is drawing that line down the middle to show the two sides of the equation. Remember, an equation is stating that those sides are equal to each other. And so from that, we get this idea that anything I do to one side, I have to do to the other, because that's the only way we can keep the two sides of that equation balanced. And keep in mind, you learned this in Math 7, you learned this in Math 6. Keep in mind your inverse operations. So when I'm solving an equation, my goal is to isolate the variable, to get that x by itself. Now to do that, I need to get rid of all that other stuff. So if I look at the left side, I have 4x, or 4 times x minus 3. I just want to know what x is, though. So in order to begin to isolate the variable, I need to get rid of this 3. So I'm thinking of inverse operations. Right now I have minus 3. The inverse of that is plus 3. Now I can't just add 3 to the left side without changing the value of the equation. So I have to also add it to the right side. Now, this minus 3 plus 3 is 0. That's the whole reason I did it. Negative 11 plus 3 is negative 8. This is a little revisit of integer rules also. And I'm still left with 4 times x on the right-hand side. Now I should be thinking the opposite of times 4 is divided by 4. So in order to finish isolating the variable, getting x by itself, I want to divide by 4. And whatever I do to the left, I have to do to the right. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So I'm left with 1x, or just x. And negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. So that's a review of two-step equations. Some of these skills are also a review. So for example, last year you should have learned about distributive property. And in this first equation, I have distributive property. I have a number outside parentheses and then 2 numbers inside parentheses. And if you remember what I'll do with distributive property, I need to multiply that number outside the parentheses by everything inside. So in this case, it looks like I'm multiplying the 3 times 2x, which is 6x. And this is the part people forget. I also need to do 3 times negative 1. Remember that sign is attached to the number that comes after it. So this minus 1 in this case is treated like a negative 1. So 3 times negative 1, negative 3, or now I have 6x minus 3 is equal to 9. We're going to come back to solving this two-step equation in a minute, and you'll see why. But another skill that you should have seen a little bit before of, maybe not in solving an equation, is combining like terms. Now, combining like terms says when I am adding or subtracting like variables. So here I have a 3x plus 3x. I can put those together. Now, I can't put 3x here together with this minus 3. Those are not like terms. But 3x plus 3x is 6x minus 3 equals 9. And now I have a two-step equation, and you might be noticing already why I was holding off on solving that distributive property equation the whole way. But the other skill we're going to target with these multi-step equations is variables on both sides. So what I mean by that is here I have an x, and here I have an x. Now, I can't really continue solving my equation and simplifying when I have an x on either side. So what I'm going to do here is just move one x to the other side. And the way that I do that is with inverse operations. So the opposite of minus 2x is plus 2x. And whatever I do on the right, I have to do on the left. So I'll say plus 2x. And the reason that I'm doing this is because negative 2x plus 2x is 0. Over on the left side, 4x plus 2x is 6x minus 3 is equal to 9. So you should have noticed as we did those 3 different skills that every single time we ended up with the same two-step equation to solve. So 6x minus 3 equals 9. And just take a second to solve this before I go ahead and solve it with you. So the first thing that I want to do, I'm going to rewrite my problem over here just so I have space. I have 6x minus 3 equals 9. And remember how I told you I think it's easiest to just draw that line down the middle, especially if you're a very visual person, to show the two sides of the equation. But the very first thing I want to do is undo this subtraction here by adding to both sides. And I end up with, I have 6x left. This is 0. And 9 plus 3 is 12. Finally, the opposite of times 6 is divided by 6. So I'll do that on both sides. And what I'm left with is x, because 6 divided by 6 is 1, is equal to 2. Now, on the next slide or on the next page of your notes, you are going to do the practice problems on your own before you check the answers with me. Okay, so you should have had a little bit of time now to work through those practice problems on your own. I'm actually going to zoom in on this section and then zoom in on the bottom. But I put question marks there on purpose because I think part of the challenge is figuring out what skill you're actually needing to apply. And so if I look at this first problem, 3x plus 8 equals 5x plus 4, I should recognize that I have variables on both sides of the equation. So the very first thing that I should be saying is that I need to fix that problem. I need to fix the variables on both sides. So I'm going to draw my line down the middle. I think it's easier to subtract the 3x from each side. Now I could pick 5x. I can subtract either one. It doesn't matter. But if I take away 5 from 3, I have to deal with negative numbers, and I don't want to do that unless I have to. It's easier to not deal with negative numbers. So I'm going to subtract the 3x from each side. And this becomes 0. So now I'm left with 8 equals 5x minus 3x is 2x plus 4. So now I'm down to a two-step equation. And this is variables on both sides. In the second example, this is a distributive property question. I have a number outside the parentheses. I have two numbers inside the parentheses. I'm going to distribute this negative 2 to the x and also to the negative 4. Now, I made this one tricky on purpose because with distributive property, there's two tough things. There's remembering to multiply the number outside the parentheses by the second number inside. So in that case, I'm talking about the negative 2 and the negative 4. But there's also remembering my operations with negative integers. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x. And negative 2 times negative 4 is a positive 8. And I'm left with equals 4. And this I'm going to label as distributive property. In my third example, I do not have variables on both sides. What I do have, though, are like terms that I can combine. So if I'm looking at that third example, on this side of my equation, I have a 4x minus 6x. And so 4x minus 6x is negative 2x plus 8 equals 4. And that was combining like terms. And I just noticed that for the variables on both sides, just so we ended up with the same looking equation every time, I should have just had you subtract the 5x. But every single one of these equations is negative 2x plus 8 equals 4. And what I would have to do on the first problem in order to get it to look like that is subtract 2x from both sides. And then I end up with negative 2x plus 8 equals, this is 0, and 4. So now I solve this. It's a two-step equation. I'm just going to draw a line down the center. Let me not pick yellow. So I want to subtract 8 from each side. I'm left with negative 2x equals 4 minus 8 is negative 4. Now be careful here. In order to get x by itself, I need to not only divide by 2, I need to divide by negative 2. And x is equal to 2. And what we'll look at next is when all of those skills, distributive property and combining like terms and variables on both sides, occur in the same problem. So this is the problem that is on the bottom of your notes. If all three skills happen in the same problem. So I gave you a checklist to use because this is typically the order that you would want to go in order to simplify the problem. But again, I would start with that line down the middle. So the first thing on the list is, can I use distributive property? So if I look through my problem, I should notice right here that there is distributive property. I'm going to distribute that negative 2 with the x and with the 3. So when I do that, I end up with negative 2x minus 6. I still have everything else in this equation. Plus 4x plus 5 equals 4x plus 7. And I'm actually going to check that off because I don't see anywhere else in there where I have distributive property. Now, do I see anywhere where I can combine like terms? And when I say combining like terms, I'm talking about on one side of the equal sign. So here, I've got a negative 2x plus 4x. And I've also got this negative 6, that I can combine with the 5. So when I do that, negative 2x plus 4x is 2x. And negative 6 plus 5 is a negative 1. So I have negative 2x minus 1 equals 4x plus 7. And I've finished combining like terms. Now I want to move those variables to one side of my equation. And so to do that, I'm going to subtract 2x from each side. What I'm left with on the left-hand side is just this negative 1 equals 2x plus 7. And now I'm down to a two-step equation. So the first thing I want to do is undo that addition or subtraction. I want to subtract 7 from each side. Negative 1 minus 7 is negative 8 equals 2x. And now I want to undo that multiplication or division. So I'm going to divide each side by 2. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4 equals x. And the last thing that I want you to do with this video is practice the problem that's on the next page of your notes before you look at the solution with me. All right, so in this last problem, I'm going to use my checklist again. I'm going to start again with that line down the middle. And the very first thing that I see is distributive property. So there is distributive property to take care of. I'm going to be distributing the 3 with the x and the negative 1. So I should have 3x minus 3 plus 2x equals 3 minus x. And I've taken care of distributive property. The next thing I want to look for is combining like terms. So here I have a 3x and a 2x. And remember, that's on one side of the equal sign. So that's 5x minus 3 equals 3 minus x. I do have variables on both sides, and I need to take care of that next. I'm going to add x to each side, and this minus x plus x would be 0. I have 6x minus 3 is equal to 3. Now I'm on the last two steps. So the first thing I want to do is undo that addition or subtraction. And so I'll add 3 to each side. And now I have 6x, the negative 3 plus 3 is 0, equals 6. So the very last thing for me to do is divide each side by 6. And here I have x equals 6 divided by 6 is 1. So you have a couple of assignments to do to go along with this video. And you also have some links that you can use if you need some more videos to watch. So let me scroll down to the bottom of this page. Alright, so you should be completing all the problems that are attached to these with the notes. You should have done that along with the video. You should be practicing on IXL still for 30 minutes per day, but I want you to focus on just these. So this is in the 8th grade skills for equations section, and these 5. The word problems it's sort of a bonus, but we've talked about all of the content from those problems in this video, but focus on U7, 8, 9, and 10. And then if you need extra help, there are 3 videos there. Each one of them focuses on a different one of those skills. So this one is distributive property, this one is combining like terms, and this one is variables on both sides. And you'll have another video coming out soon talking about graphing.